Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tim Russell, Vice President, Community Engagement and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for WTTW and WFMT, and welcome to today's Chicago Tonight Black Voices, a WTTW News Community Conversation. WTTW is committed to producing and presenting trusted, best-in-class content fueled by distinctly Chicago sensibility. We have served as Chicago's window to the world, and our purpose is to enrich lives, engage communities, and inspire exploration. Essential to this purpose are our core values, in particular, diversity and equity. We celebrate the differences, embrace inclusivity, and strive for equity. The stories we tell, as well as the people in front of and behind the camera and microphone, reflect the myriad of faces and voices of our region. 67 years ago, 14-year-old Chicagoan Emmett Till became a symbol of the civil rights movement after he was lynched in Mississippi in 1955. Till's mother, Mamie Till-Mobley, worked to make sure his name wasn't forgotten. At Till's funeral, Till-Mobley insisted on an open casket to show his brutalized body, and Jet magazine published the photos. At the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity to visit Till's room. It was the most moving thing I ever saw. Sacred, a memorial designed to look like the very church where Till was waked in Chicago back in 1955. No photography was allowed inside the exhibit. It forced visitors to be present, to take in the photos of Till and his mother and his coffin. The casket is staged in such a way that people have to stand on tiptoe to even see a corner of the image inside showing his mutilated face, which is also displayed in a case directly outside the exhibit. I felt Emmett Till's presence, but just as important, I felt Miss Till-Mobley's presence. Lead support for Chicago Tonight Black Voices is provided by Fifth Third Bank. Additional support is provided by Gertrude Dane and James H. Wooten Jr., Allstate, the Chicago Community Trust, Eon Clinics, the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, the Phil Foundation of Illinois, Lloyd A. Fry Foundation, Julian Grace Foundation, Nicholas Anton and Judy and John McCarter. Finally, members like you make it possible for WTTW to bring provocative ideas to life, to tackle the issues that matter, and to expand our perspectives on the world in which we live. There's only one reason why this is possible, and that reason is you. Thank you for your support. Now, please welcome our host, Brandis Friedman.
Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for that introduction. And hello to those of you who are joining us, and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, a WTTW News community conversation. And thank you for spending your evening with us. As Tim said, I am Brandis Friedman. And Tim has recapped a good bit of the Emmett Till story. I think most of us who are here probably know it, but we know that more than 60 years later, it is something that still resonates. It was back in 1955 that 14-year-old Emmett Till became a symbol of the civil rights movement after his lynching in Mississippi. His mother, Mamie Till-Mobley, worked to make sure that he and his name were not forgotten. It was she, Mamie Till-Mobley, who insisted on that open casket to show his brutalized body, and Jet magazine published those photos that many of us have etched in our memories. This month, ABC Network aired the limited series drama Women of the Movement about Till-Mobley, along with a companion docuseries. Tonight, we'll talk about why Till's story is still relevant today and how family members and other community members are working to keep their memory alive. So those of you who are joining us, you're in a listen-only mode, but that does not mean that we don't want you to be part of the conversation. We definitely want to hear from you. So please do chime in the chat function with your questions and your comments. I will be sure to get those questions to our guests. And let's start by introducing those guests and thanking them for taking time to spend with us this Monday evening. First, I'd like to introduce Reverend Wheeler Parker, Emmett Till's cousin, who was with him in Mississippi, in that Mississippi home, the night that Till was kidnapped. Reverend Parker, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Also,
thank you very much.
Excellent. Also, Chris Benson, a professor at Northwestern, who co-wrote the book with Mamie Till-Mobley about the lynching of her son. Christopher, good to see you again. You and I talk a good bit. And Tanya Huelett, Senior Director of Educator Content Development at Facing History and Ourselves, which is developing a curriculum around the story of Emmett Till. Tanya, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you.
So before we get to the conversation, let's check out a clip from the series Women of the Movement. If you watched our Black Voices segment earlier this month, you might have seen this one. Here it is. Now, Reverend Parker, I think you and I talked about this before. I'm the mother of two Black boys. I grew up in Mississippi. And even just watching that scene, you know, a young man happily trotting off to his vacation, it was difficult to watch. Reverend Parker, what was it like for you to see this story told on the screen?
It impacted me because it was so close to the truth. It had me in tears, and I think we need to do this lest we forget. And when you forget, you tend to do the same thing over again. So I think it was a good film, and I think it can help a lot of people to see the truth.
Chris, ABC picked up the rights to the book that you co-wrote with Mamie Till-Mobley, Death of Innocence, the story of the hate crime that changed America. What was this process like, you know, turning her story and his story into a scripted series? And as you're talking about it, we'll see a little bit of video of the series as well.
Sure. Well, this is the fulfillment of a promise we made to Mamie Till-Mobley back in 2002. A group of friends of mine and I visited her to talk about turning the story into some kind of video treatment, motion picture, theatrical, or TV series. And she blurted out, when she found out that I had written a novel, she said, well, I've always wanted to write a book. So immediately we decided I would write a book with her, and we'd turn that into some kind of video treatment. So this was the promise. She wanted to have a book because she was a school teacher for 26 years in the Chicago public school system. And she knew that a book would endure, that the story would outlive her. But she also was excited to know that it could someday become a motion picture or a TV series, because then it would reach the widest possible audience. And as we know, the story of Emmett Till has been told and retold, and actually there are so many mistakes in the way it was told over the years that she wanted to correct that record. Is something that that Reverend Parker and I have been working on as well.
And of course, Chris, you know, we know the story of Emmett Till largely because of the work that Mamie Till-Mobley did to make sure that we would know that story. Tanya Huelett, you know, as someone whose work is dedicated to creating history lessons, what's your reaction to the series?
You know, it's interesting to think about it professionally. I first come to it as a mother, and I watched that scene, that clip that you showed of Mamie, you know, carrying her son to the train station and probably staying up late, making sure his bag was packed. And I think about it through that lens. And as an educator, I think about how important it is to humanize those of us, those in the past. I was going to say our heroes, but I don't think that's the right word. To humanize those who have lost and given so much so that we could gain so much. And so I look at this and I think about students watching him and seeing themselves in him and seeing their own excitement about embarking upon new journeys. And so I think about that personal connection.
Reverend Parker, back to you. You were also a consultant on the program. What about Mamie Till-Mobley and Emmett Till did you want to be sure was reflected in the series?
I think the closeness that they had, and I think it showed her as being strong, because up until that point, Mamie was well groomed and well trained, but her mother was the signature person, and Bobo Emmett Till was like her brother. See, I knew them as that until she had to step up, and when she stepped up, and I think the movie depicts very, very vividly how strong she became, and she was already trained. She just needed the opportunity to show it.
I want to remind our viewers that if you all have questions, please, you're welcome to drop those in the chat function, and I'll be sure to get them to our guests. So feel free to chime in. Tanya, back.
If I can chime in.
Sure, please do,
I
Chris.
just wanted to add something to that because having, she and I worked on her story the last 6 months of her life, basically. And I'll never forget that as I would complete a chapter, I would read it to her. She was in terrible health. Her eyesight was failing her, even though her vision was still keen. And I would print out the pages in like 500-point type or something so that she could read along with me with her eyeglasses and her magnifying glass. And we'd read together just so that she could see how the story was unfolding. And to pick up on the point that Reverend Parker just made and you observed, she was overjoyed at one moment to see the transformation that was coming through in the book. And she looked up at me and said, "This really shows me coming into my own." And so she was quite proud of that, not only because of the experience, her personal experience, the transformation that it showed in her, but what she could demonstrate for other people, because she was a deep believer that we all have a purpose in this life, is something she shared with school children for so many years, but she wanted that to be communicated as well, that we all can make a difference.
Chris, I know you probably would never pretend to know what she's going to say or think, but what do you think she would think about this series that, the story that we're telling now, 60-something years later?
I think she would be proud. She would also be happy that she would have another chance to go out and talk, because she would get invited to come and speak. But she would definitely be happy that this treatment of the story is true to the story we tried to capture in her book. And it did humanize their relationship. It did take Emmett Till from his status as an icon, as a martyr, and show him as a fully developed person, because there's a lesson in that as well. He shows in the relationship he has with his mother just what was taken from us on that level, and what is taken from us by racism in this country. I mean, there's so many kids who were not murdered as Emmett was, but whose life chances were cut short all the same by racism. And that's something we tried to capture, and she would be really excited to know that that's coming through.
Tanya, facing history in ourselves, you all develop history lessons to challenge teachers and their students to stand up to bigotry and hate. What role can depictions of history like this series have on how people remember past atrocities? And as you're speaking, we'll get a little bit more video in here as well.
Thank you. Well, I mean, one of the things that we have known for some time at Facing History is that people are often rendered numb by stories in aggregate. So if we talk about stories in history of, hundreds of thousands of Black men and women and children and people harmed by racial violence, killed, lynched, oppressed, ground down, people can get overwhelmed and they become numb. And that causes inertia, actually. It doesn't cause people to act. But when we pull out stories and when we bring those stories and those people to life, when we humanize them, or when we allow and enhance opportunities for others to see their humanity, people often find themselves in those stories. They find possibility in those stories. When they see someone like Mamie Till-Mobley, and they see that Mamie Till-Mobley was an extraordinary woman, and she was a woman who didn't come from great means, then people begin, particularly students, began to be energized around their potential to make change. They begin to see that you don't require a great number of material resources to make change. You don't require being born into extraordinary circumstances to make change, right? They start to see that there is so much that's amazing about Mamie Till, but that comes from within her. And so taking these stories, these aggregate, painful, horrific stories of generations of violence, pulling out individuals, showing us their humanity, showing us their potential, and showing us their choices, that is what Facing History believes can enliven students and empower students to make change in their own right.
And Tanya, while I've got you here, I'm going to use this opportunity because, we hear a lot about critical race theory being taught in schools lately. How do you think opponents of critical race theory are using that to influence how history is being taught in schools currently?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I would say is, at Facing History, we really believe that you have to be able to engage and face, right, to confront your present and your past in order for us to move forward and make the future that we want together. right? We cannot shy away from that. We cannot turn a blind eye to that. I know as an educator and as a parent that young people, when they are not exposed to stories that help them make sense of the world around them, they make up their own narratives, right? And those narratives can be very, very dangerous. Or once again, they stabilize the world and they encourage young people to believe that nothing can and will change. This is the way it's always been. And so we have to bring these stories into our classrooms. We have to face and encounter the true history of this country if we want to ensure that we have a future where justice is pursued for all, right? Where opportunity is pursued for all, and where we can right wrongs. And so there's a lot of fear rooted in the push against CRT. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of entitlement and a desire to preserve privilege rooted in that, right? But that only supports a small group of people. And so our vision is that you have to do this work in order to empower young people to see the world as it is and figure out on their own how they want to make change.
Now, the Senate passed a bill this month to award the Congressional Gold Medal posthumously to Emmett Till and Mamie Till-Mobley. Illinois Representative Bobby Rush is also sponsoring a bill to issue a commemorative postage stamp in honor of Mamie Till-Mobley. Reverend Parker, how important are these types of recognition?
They're very important. One thing Mamie was concerned about is whether her son died in vain or not. This shows that he did not die in vain. She would be very pleased to see what's going on. And Emmett speaks louder in death than he would if he had lived. He would not have impacted the world like his death has impacted the world. So it's very good.
And Reverend Parker, I know you're also working with Preserve Roberts Temple to restore the church where Till's funeral was held. Tell us a little bit about that work, please.
They have received sufficient money to stabilize the church, and it seemed like there are a lot of people out there who want to contribute to this end, and we're just looking forward to seeing it completed. To this natural, they want to put it back to the natural state that it was when they had his funeral.
Chris, and before I come back to you, Chris, I want to remind our viewers again, you know what? There's some questions in the chat function. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Thanks for those of you who are chiming in. We welcome more of you to do the same. Chris, why do you think this story resonates with, still with so many people today?
Well, it's just nobody's ever answered for Emmett. And I think that grates against our consciousness, doesn't it? It's like fingernails across a chalkboard. It really is unnerving on one level. It also is a source of agitation to get people to move to try to seek justice. In this case and all the other cases where you hear Emmett Till's name invoked, right? Every time another young Black man is taken down by somebody who gets away with it, an authority figure who gets away with it, we think about Emmett Till again. So it's important in a country that is supposed to represent, freedom, justice, and equality, that we work to make sure the country keeps that promise. And I think that is what motivates people. So it's unfinished business, there's no question about it, but we are working now, especially given the recent decision by the Department of Justice that there is no case that they could pursue, to find other ways to reach a just outcome of this story, to do the good works that Mamie Till-Mobley represented throughout her life, and that Reverend Parker has continued to live and in his experience. So we're going to continue to do that. We didn't see justice, criminal justice in this case, but we are going to see justice in all the ways that we can to do the good works of Mamie Till-Mobley.
One of the questions from one of our viewers references the Justice Department, Chris, closing the Emmett Till investigation back in December, and asks, are there still opportunities to get justice and accountability for the family, for example, by bringing pressure for Carolyn Bryant Dunham to be charged? Chris, I'll let you answer that one.
Sure. I mean, there's a sort of an existential question here. It's like, what does justice require in this case? I mean, as we were told when we were briefed by the Department of Justice, justice would have meant that Emmett Till came home alive, right? He's gone now. There's nothing we're going to be able to do to bring him back. So how do we seek justice? What does justice mean in this case? So yeah, if there's anybody who's alive and there's evidence that can connect them to Emmett's abduction, murder or the cover-up of his murder. Any charges that still could be brought, they will be brought. We were assured of that. The difficulty is that as time moves on, evidence fades, memories fade, and it's difficult to make these cases. So we understand that as well.
So let's take another, there are other questions and I'm going to come to them in a minute, I promise, but I wanted to play this other clip from the series. This is where Mamie Till-Mobley she's riding in the car talking with family after the trial.
Context in which this murder occurs. Then the plan is to spotlight the activism and lifelong work of Ida B. Wells Barnett, a journalist, educator, activist, and civil rights leader. And this will help our students understand Emmett Till's murder and the civil rights movement as part of the long Black freedom struggle, which is incredibly important. 2 more lessons. One, hopefully returning to the trial and to Mississippi to think more about Mo's right, the world he lived in, the unprecedented nature of the trial and of Moses' decision to take the stand and testify against these white men. And finally, the unit will close, and this is where the Facing History approach really becomes central, by considering the legacy of the murder of Emmett Till and the actions of those who fought for justice in the wake of his death. It will likely make connections to contemporary cases of the racially motivated killing of Black adults, which we've already begun to talk about, and children. Thinking about the legacy of the murder of Emmett Till, its relationship to Black Lives Matter, helping students think about the ways that people are standing up and moving toward activism in the present.
Okay. That's a lot, and it's awesome. I'm gonna let it marinate for a second. Chris or Reverend Parker, do you have anything you want to add about this being taught in schools as Tanya just outlined?
Well, we're actually working with Facing History on this, yes, in partnership. We got a grant that enables us to develop this as a pilot and then move on from there. So I'm working with Imani in bringing the narrative into the work. So we're very excited about it, actually. Well, I've been associated with Facing History for quite a number of years, so many I can't remember now, but I would participate in the summer institutes for Chicago public school teachers to bring the Emmett Till story into the discussions about how to engage this subject matter, the broadly diversity issues in the Chicago public schools. So they would always ask me to bring the Emmett Till story into whatever the theme of the particular summer institute was. So if it was Reconstruction, it's like Reconstruction, Emmett Till, go. It's like it's almost like improv, right? Emmett Till, eugenics, go. So we've had a chance over the years to think about how important the story is for teachers in this critical period we're in right now. And so we're very excited about that. And it touches on something you asked about earlier too, this notion of the pushback on critical race theory. I mean, the critical race theory is not taught in high schools, we know that, but everything now is critical race theory by people who want to erase our story so that they can rewrite a story on a blank slate, right? So we have to push back against that pushback in order to preserve the lessons of the past so that we don't repeat them.
And Chris, tell us, a little bit about a lot of the other work that you're doing to keep the Till story alive. Of course, we've already heard from Tanya about the curriculum, an institute, and I know that there's talk about the national park.
Yeah.
Yeah. What can you tell us?
That's for me.
That's for you.
Okay. Yeah. So we have formed the Emmett Till and Mamie Till-Mobley Institute, which is focusing on all kinds of education programs for young people, including the partnership with Facing History and the Winter Institute in Mississippi as well. We're affiliated with that institute. So we have a youth engagement arm of this operation. But we also want to engage young people on the lessons that flow from the Emmett Till story, on the importance of civic engagement. So that's really the outcome that we hope will achieve. The National Park is also part of that education process. We're in discussion, mostly Dr. Parker, who is somewhere off screen here, is working with the National Trust and the National Park Service and National Park Conservancy to dedicate a non-contiguous national park in honor of Emmett Till and Mamie Till-Mobley, partly in the Delta and partly in Chicago, so that people can actually experience the story and learn in that way as well. So we'll also have some activities down at the courthouse. The courthouse has been restored to its original look, from 1955. And so we can bring students in there as well so that they can experience it. And Reverend Parker was instrumental in bringing some students from West Virginia, Reverend Parker, to actually spend 3 days reading the transcript, dramatic reading of the transcript in the courthouse. So I don't know if Reverend Parker wants to say something about that experience. It was quite moving for me.
I appreciate everything that everyone's doing. I stay in my lane and I bid you Godspeed. That's doing a great job.
Well, Reverend Parker, go ahead, Chris, sorry.
I was just going to say he's a modest man, but that was quite an extraordinary event. As you can imagine, I mean, these are students from West Virginia. There was a mixed group, but a lot of white students who had discovered Emmett Till by way of going through the trial transcript. And at the end of it, I mean, it brings tears to your eyes to think about it, particularly, these white kids who said, I never understood, all the things that I had only heard about, sort of on the edge of my consciousness. And they were saying things like how it was changing their lives. One young student said she wanted to be a lawyer now because she wanted to fight for rights. So this is a white student who was transformed by the story. So we think that's really the power of the story. It's not just a Black American story, it's an American story, right? It's a story about where we were, where we are, how we got here. And we think it's transformative and it'll help people understand their position in our society. We call it cultural competence, right? We talk about how we can understand our position vis-a-vis other groups in our society so that we can work together to make this a better society.
Chris, I might add, it was a predominantly white group and they held court at the end. They found them guilty.
Oh, that's right.
The students did, they have a mock trial and.
Yeah, they had them on trial. They had their own court. They found them guilty.
Yeah. I wanted to share something that one of our viewers has shared in the chat, Barbara Wright. Mamie was enrolled in Chicago Teachers College, now Chicago State University, as Mamie Bradley. I met her in 1959 when we shared a class in methods of teaching language arts. I studied with her and her best friend many nights at their apartment. Our conversations were always school related. We never discussed Emmett or the horrendous treatment and death he suffered. I was absolutely amazed at her ability to compartmentalize the events of her life and the courage it required to continue on her life's trajectory to become an educator. It goes on to say they maintained some contact. Then later on, when Mamie Till-Mobley became a minister, they lost a little bit of contact. Barbara Wright Pryor, thank you for sharing that. Reverend Parker, along the lines of some of what we were just discussing with like the younger groups that you were working with, this question does come from someone in the Q&A. How can younger generations continue to carry out the Till legacy?
I think if they take a lesson from Mamie, she taught us how to deal with atrocities and negative. She took a lemon and made lemonade. You can never read or hear anything about her, 60 years or so that she lived, saying anything bad about anyone. She said, as far as she's concerned, it's like these people never existed. She was busy, and you can learn from her. If you got a life and you're busy, you can deal with this for a moment, but you got to get back to the business at hand. And we're here to serve people. She died with her boots on, trying to serve people. She's a happy person, and I learned from her, and I take the same way of life.
Reverend, where do you think she found that strength?
From her mother and her faith in the church. She said in 2003 at the reconciliation bit, and she said, God took hate out of my life 43 years ago, I believe it's 43 years ago. And we've come from a very religious background, and we definitely taught not to hate. They teach you all the time, you got to love everybody. Don't get sloppy with it, not Hollywood love. Sometimes we don't understand what love really is. God said, those whom you love, it chastise. So that don't mean you go along with everything, but you love when you're trying to help people see the light and do the right thing. And she did that. She was a great example.
Tanya, same question to you from earlier about how, the younger generation can continue to carry on the Till legacy.
Yeah, The word I think that comes most strongly to my mind is disruption. I think that the choice that Mamie Till-Mobley made to disrupt the comfort of people at the time that she was dealing with profound loss, right? And saying, let the world see what they did to my boy. I think our children actually, young people are very adept at disruption in their use of social media right now, right? And their ability to not allow us to be comfortable when we are not using the right pronouns, when we are reinforcing, for example, that this is just the way it is, right? Go along to get along, right? Or we are saying we had to deal with X when we were coming up, you should learn to deal with it too. And young people are disrupting every single day. They disrupt businesses and their profits. They disrupt news cycles, right? By offering different vantage points. They disrupt at family dinners and gatherings. They disrupt with their colleges and universities, their high schools. They push back on us. They demand justice. They demand to be seen and heard. They demand that Black lives, for example, are seen, are valued, and that justice comes when those lives are devalued. And so I think there's actually a perfect marriage between the model of what Mamie Till-Mobley chose to do in that moment and how that was a catalyst and one of the main modalities of young people today in the ways that they engage, and that's disruption. And so I want to say that this case study and this story, not case study, of Emmett Till teaches us what powerful disruption looks like, right? How it can be a catalyst so that the disruption isn't just for its own sake, but it is to move a society.
Well said. Someone else commenting in the Q&A, this is interesting, quote, I teach social studies in Mississippi and the Department of Education has presented the 2022 curriculum that removes the specific names and references everyone as he, she, etc. This is an effort to wipe out the true history from the classroom. Another question, I'm going to ask this question. It's not entirely related, but I like it, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Reverend Parker, we like the picture behind you. Do you mind sharing who's in that photo?
Of course, it's Emmett to my, that would be to my, this side is Emmett.
There you go.
We'll do it that way. And that's me and a friend of ours, Joe B. Williams. He's a businessman in California now. And that I was taken right here in Summit, Argo, where I live. And I guess I was about, I don't know, 1950, I was about 11. Of course, Emmett would be about 9. And you can see he's one of the happiest kids you ever want to see. I always tell the guy that I'm riding, so you don't look too comfortable sitting on my bike. That's right here in town.
It won't be your bike is the point. Okay. Last question, and then we'll probably wrap it up fairly soon. Reverend Parker, I'll give this one to you. How do you wish for Emmett Till to be remembered?
My biggest thing is that I was hoping Carolyn would confess, and at the point when they said she had confessed, she lied on Emmett. I would like to see him portrayed different. Our system portrayed him like he deserved what he got. I don't like that, and I would like to see that change. And I guess we have to remember him that his life, because of his death, a lot of changes came about, and it's a positive thing, and that's about the best way I can put that right now.
Christopher, Tanya, any final words?
Yeah, one of the things that Mamie Till-Mobley wanted was for the world to see her son, not as she wanted them to see her son in 1955, but to see her son as a human being who was really gifted. He had something to offer this world, and that was taken away. And it's not just her loss. It's not just the family's loss, Reverend Parker and all the other family members. Mm-hmm. It's a loss for all of us, because if you think about it, this is a kid who had something to offer this world, and we've been denied that now. So she would have wanted us to think about that. And she also wanted us to know the truth. I think one of the interesting things about the picture is that it does capture the role of the Black press in preserving this story and moving it forward. Is the Black press that produced the photos of Emmett's mutilated remains that that went international. It was the Black press that went out dressed in overalls in the Mississippi Delta to go undercover to find witnesses who could come forward. They are the ones who brought Willie Reed forward. He was a person who saw a lot of what was happening or heard a lot of what was happening at the barn where they beat Emmett to death. But she would want us to know the power of the media, right? And also the power of the media to distort, because for so many years, the story that was the official story of what happened down there was a story that was written by a white Southern writer, William Bradford Huey. And he told the version based on what the killers told him and distorted it. He presented Emmett as, you know, this tough kid from Chicago and almost glamorized the killers. And that was really sad. It was interesting that first time we sat down with Mamie Till-Mobley and talked about trying to turn her story into a motion picture. She said, "It won't be Ghosts of Mississippi, will it?" And we all laughed because we knew what she meant by that. She had a very sophisticated take on pictures, and particularly motion pictures that deal with Black subject matter. She didn't want this story to be told through the eyes of a white savior, right, as the Ghosts of Mississippi was told. She said she recognized there might be some enhancements, but she wanted it to be true to her story, the story she lived, the story she died hoping would live on beyond her. So with that, you know, I hope people get the deeper meaning of this story and the experience of Black people in this country.
I don't have much more to say. I think what I don't want is for Emmett Till to be remembered as a martyr who had to die for those of us to have something good, right? For the rest of us to have some progress. That wasn't his purpose. He was Mamie Till-Mobley's son. He was a beautiful Black child, something that many people in our society are unwilling to believe exist. Black children, Black boys, right? He had his entire life and future ahead of him, and he should have been able to live it. And as Reverend Willard Parker said, something powerful has come out of his death, but he should have been able to live that life. I want students in classrooms to look at his life, and I want them to find a connection, not necessarily that could have been me, but I want them to find a connection, to see his humanity, and to understand his death, not just as a catalyst, but as a powerful tragedy and a powerful human failing, a failing of American society, right? And a testimony to the work that we still have to do in our society to guarantee that Black children that can be children, that all children can be children and have their entire futures ahead of them. And to say something about Mamie Till-Mobley, one last thing, this whole, the story, the movie that is out now is a heartbreaking tribute to the strength required of Black mothers and Black women. And that strength should not be required. We would be nowhere as a country without it, but it shouldn't be required.
Well said. And before I let the three of you go, I want to mention, thank you, Janice Feinberg in the chat. Something that she's dropped in for us. Collaboration and the DuSable Museum of African American History are partnering to present a theatrical reading of Trial in the Delta, the Murder of Emmett Till, a new adaptation of the trial transcript of the state of Mississippi versus Milam and Bryant, the men who were not found guilty, were found not guilty of murdering Emmett Till. And there's more that's coming up later on in February, and there's more information at collaboraction.org. Just wanted to share that. And thanks to my guests for joining us. It's an honor and a pleasure to speak with all three of you. And thanks to all of you for joining tonight's community conversation. We have shared a short form in the chat. It's coming. If you click it, there it is right there. You can submit ideas, stories, topics, issues that you think we ought to be covering. So please do take a moment to fill that out and share your thoughts. Before we part ways, I hope you enjoyed tonight's conversation and that you will watch Chicago Tonight Latino Voices and Chicago Tonight Black Voices. They both broadcast on Saturdays at 6 p.m., Sundays at 10 p.m. on WTTW. They are live streamed. They are on demand at WTTW.com/voices. You can also get them on Facebook, YouTube, we're everywhere. Also, Reverend Parker, if people would like to if they like to support Reverend Parker's work to preserve the church where Emmett Till's funeral was held, you can learn more about donating there at preserverobertstemple.com. And please join us on Monday. What's the date? Monday, it's the end of February 28th for our Chicago Tonight Latino Voices Community Conversation. That one is about Afro-Latino history in Chicago and the United States. You can visit WTTW.com/events for details. That's a mouthful, I know, but that's all I've got. Thanks again to our guests for joining us, and have a great evening. And I think tomorrow starts Black History Month. So happy Black History Month, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.